Shabbat Shalom. If Pete Rose had played in the era of this week's Torah reading, in the world of biblical justice, he would have been stoned to death. Our Torah reading concludes with the tale of a man who commits a high crime in the Israelite community, a Makallel, a blasphemer of the name of God, a public desecration of the highest order. His sentence is swift and final. All those who were within hearing shall lay their hands upon his head, and the entire congregation shall stone him to death. The public trust has been broken. An example must be made. And what better deterrence, not just a public execution, but an execution by the public? An eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, declares the next verse. Harsh, unquestionably. Clear, absolutely. A sacred boundary has been defiled and consequences must follow. No exceptions. Nobody is above the law. Mishpat echad, one standard, states the text, for strangers and citizens alike. For those who don't know, meaning the cantor and anyone visiting from Atlantis, Narnia, or Wakanda, Pete Rose was one of the greatest baseball players ever to play the game. He finished his career with a lifetime batting average of over 300, a record-setting 4,256 hits, 17 All-Star appearances, and 3 World Series. He's the National League MVP in '73, World Series MVP when the Reds won in '75. He led the NL in batting 3 times and had a 44-game hit streak in '78. Charlie Hustle, the hit king, the face of the Big Red Machine. Rose's achievements are, without question, worthy of admission into the Hall of Fame. Pristine as Rose's Cooperstown resume may be, so too the venality of his sin. Having retired from playing in '86, on August 24th, 1989, the late Commissioner Bart Giamatti banned Rose from the game for violating the sport's prohibition on gambling, having placed bets on the Cincinnati Reds while managing the team. The evidence was overwhelming. Testimony, phone records of calls from the clubhouse to the bookies, financial records, betting slips with Rose's signature and footprint and fingerprints. The rule, colloquially known as Rule 21, is clear. It's actually posted on every major league locker room. The prohibition against betting on ball games with a penalty of permanent ineligibility. Rose had bet not just on sports, not just on baseball, but on his own team. He had violated an essential rule of the game and a public trust. In biblical speak, he was a Makallel. Rose signed a document accepting the ban but not accepting any guilt, a point to which we'll return. Permanently ineligible, Rose's pariah status held firm until his passing last September at the age of 83. And yet, given the news of the week, it would seem that permanent is not quite as permanent as we believed it to be. Last Tuesday, the current Major League Baseball commissioner, Rob Manfred, removed Rose and 16 other deceased individuals from the permanently ineligible list. And while the limitations of my time and your interest prevent me from doing a deep dive into the other players and their violations, most famously Shoeless Joe Jackson of Black Sox fame, the practical result of Tuesday's decision is that Rose's name could be up for entry into the Hall of Fame as early as a December 2027 vote. As for what prompted the posthumous policy reversal, while some point to Manfred's December meeting with Rose's daughter, A surer bet, forgive the pun, is his meeting last month with President Donald Trump, who, believing Rose to have been treated unfairly, has long called for Rose's reinstatement. Their conversation reportedly ranged from the impact of immigration policies on international athletes, the future of the MLB, and yes, Pete Rose. Manfred's Tuesday's announcement, as morally slippery as a Gaylord Perry fastball, asserted, in my view, once an individual has passed away, the purpose of Rule 21 have been served. Obviously, a person no longer with us cannot represent a threat to the integrity of the game. Even if you don't care about Pete Rose, the Hall of Fame, or heaven forbid, baseball itself, the questions of the case are well worth considering. His banishment, his recent reinstatement, and potential entry into Cooperstown matter not only for what they say about one flawed individual, but for what it reveals about all of us, our moral boundaries, our appetite for accountability, and the kind of a society we aspire to inhabit. The case of Pete Rose, a Rorschach test, if you will, for the questions of our time. Distinct as the issues may be, sin and sinner, justice and mercy, atonement and accountability, they are deeply interconnected. As it relates to this week's Torah reading, we might begin by exploring the relationship between sin and sinner, between Pete Rose's public stature and his personal failings. There are those who argue, as does the medieval commentator Nachmanides in Reflections on this week's priestly leaders of the Torah reading, that public figures should be held to higher standards. Those in positions of visibility and influence are exemplars and must expect to be subjected to heightened moral scrutiny. Others take a different stance. Pete Rose, they contend, was a ball player, not a bishop, a hitter, not a holy man. He should be judged not by his ethics, but by his play on the field. You say he sinned, I say 4,256 hits, more than any other player in history. It is a question not just about sports heroes, it's about the norms we hold for ourselves and our leaders, biblical, modern, local, national, incumbents and challengers, Democrats and Republicans. At what point does someone's personal failings render them unfit to serve the public? Can we critique the sin and keep the sinner? Moses had a temper. King David was no saint. Can that which is flawed and that which is noble coexist in the same vessel? What about the metric of sin? What is the metric and who is a judge for moral gatekeeping? As the subject of Rose has been renewed this week, it's a question, this one, that's probably the most charged. A friend of mine was quick to point out that whatever one may think about Rose's gambling, it's Rose's sexual relationships with underage women, statutory rape, never mind tax evasion, that renders him unfit for re-entry to baseball and the Hall of Fame. We may have turned a corner on cancel culture, but accountability remains a value, and at a certain point, the range and magnitude of Rose's misdeeds disqualify him from the roster of the redeemed. And yet, Rose was accused of no wrongdoing as an athlete, no performance-enhancing drugs, no stolen signs, no deflating footballs, nothing. Besides, in an age when betting companies like DraftKings and FanDuel are major sponsors of baseball, can the sport really lay claim to the moral high ground? Either gambling, like marijuana and other once taboo behaviors, has become a socially acceptable behavior, or gambling, like other addictions, is a condition deserving of sympathy, not stigma, rehabilitation, not rebuke. And even if you hold that we all have agency over our choices and are thus accountable, the Hall of Fame is, again, about professional excellence, not being a mensch. Ty Cobb was a bigot, known for his violent streak. Roger Hornsby was not only a gambler, but an anti-Semite. Gaylord Perry openly admitted to doctoring baseballs, and Mickey Mantle was a womanizer and alcoholic. Each of us, wrote Brian Stephen, is more than the worst thing we've ever done. Those guys are in the Hall of Fame. Roses by any other name. Why not Pete? As I hinted at earlier, the Rose debate raises the question of penance, contrition, justice, and mercy. Let's stipulate that Rose did wrong. Don't we, at least as Jews, believe in atonement? Isn't that what Yom Kippur is about? Didn't Maimonides teach that there's no sin so great that it bars return? Doesn't it say in the Talmud, in the place where penitents stand, even the completely righteous cannot? To all this, the answer is yes, of course. Because while there are undoubtedly hurts that we can never forgive or forget, Judaism is decidedly on the side of the penitent, a pro-tshuva, pro-mercy religion. We might not make you a gala honoree, but sinners are always welcome in the synagogue. If this place was only reserved for saints, it wouldn't be so full. And yet, for our player in question, Judaism's generous view of repentance becomes a very lens by which his failure is most starkly exposed. For from the day of his banishment to the day of his death, Rose refused to admit the full scope of his misdeeds, despite evidence to the contrary. I am completely mystified and not a little bit cynical at Manfred's sweeping posthumous induction of Rose and his 16 fellow exiles. Absent new facts, such reinstatement should either happen during the lifetime of the offender so as to grant them a sliver of this worldly redemption, or not at all, an exclamation point of deterrence to the would-be offenders. For Rose, it was not just the sin, but his refusal to name the sin that may well have been his greatest failing and the most tragic dimension of the story. There is much, much more to say, which is why we have bar stools and blogs and bleachers and kiddishes, so each one of us can argue our opinions to our heart's delight. But it's a seventh inning stretch, and if you haven't figured out how I feel, let me share where I personally stand. I draw your attention to the coda of Rose's 1989 banishment. Just days after issuing the lifetime suspension, Major League Baseball Commissioner Bart Giamatti died at the age of 51 of a massive heart attack, perhaps a strain of the proceedings taking its final toll. If you're inclined to read just one thing on the matter, then let it be Giamatti's final public statement, a selection of which I share with you now. Baseball is a beautiful and exciting game, loved by millions, I among them, and I believe baseball is an important, enduring American institution. It must assert and aspire to the highest principles of integrity, of performance, of fair play within its rules. It will come as no surprise that, like any institution composed of human beings, this institution will not always fulfill its highest aspirations. I know of no earthly institution that does. But this one, because it is so much a part of our history as a people, and because it has such a purchase on our national soul, has an obligation to the people for whom it is played, to its fans and well-wishers, to strive for excellence in all things and to promote the highest ideals. I will be told, Giamatti continued, that I am an idealist. I hope so. I will continue to locate ideals I hold for myself and for my country in the national game as well as in other national institutions. And while there will be debate and dissent about this or that or another occurrence on or off the field, and while the game's nobler parts will always be enmeshed in human frailties of those who, whatever their role, have stewardship of this game, let there be no doubt or dissent about our goals for baseball or our dedication to it, nor about our vigilance and vigor and patience in protecting the game from blemish or stain or disgrace. The prompt for Giamatti's speech was Pete Rose. The ostensible subject matter, baseball. But reading his words today, it strikes me that Giamatti was talking about something bigger, about America, about who we are, who we could be, and who we should be. Sympathetic as I am to human failing, the need for second chances, and the belief that it's in our cracks and rough edges that our humanity can be found, I also believe that there is right and there is wrong, and that the same free will that leads us astray is a free will that prompts us to admit sin, apologize, and take agency for our future behavior. Pete Rose fell short of that bar. Giamatti was right. Manfred is wrong. The game of baseball is weaker. The fabric of our country further frayed. And the moral credit rating of our country has been downgraded once again. As another great American, James Earl Jones, reminded us, also in 1989, the one constant through all the years has been baseball. America has rolled by like an army of steamrollers. It has been erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again. But baseball has marked the time. This field, this game, it's part of our past. It reminds us of all that once was good, and it could be again. On so many counts, for so many reasons, may we continue to locate the ideals we hold for ourselves in our national institutions, and may we endeavor to make our national pastime and our nation good again. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for being part of the Park Avenue Synagogue family. I hope you enjoyed the sermon. Please consider becoming a regular part of our online community by scanning the QR code or visiting supportpas.org or making a donation. Shalom, and see you in Shul.